Hello and welcome back to the latest edition of the vlog. I'm back to League for this one, but with a little bit of looking at some practice shots first. So after last week's session, where I was again trying to play straight up the lane, up the right side, which is generally a pretty good shot on house, I just wasn't quite able to get there. I was all over the place, sort of spraying things, couldn't get consistently up the lane with the ball. So I went ahead and switched over to a different, more comfortable line, changed balls, and was fine. Once I shared that video with some folks on Luke Rosdahl's server, a couple guys actually talked to me and pointed out a couple suggestions. And these are things I went to practice the week before League, and then also tried to apply in League this week. The main goal was opening up my hips at the start. They noticed that my swing plane was going around my body. Being a little overweight guy, I am a little bit wider than I really should be. And part of what I was trying to do when playing to the right was squaring up a lot on to the line. And so that meant when I'd push away, my swing would then go around my body, and that would be leading to really bad alignment once I was actually coming through the ball to the line. The goal is to actually start, even if I'm playing right, start with my right foot back, opening up my hips a little bit at the line. Once I did that, it was observed that I was still way out right with my push away, so I had to make sure I made that effort to come in and keep the ball more close under my head, so I actually would have a straight push away instead of an out push away. Once I made that change, things were looking pretty good. Like all changes, it's going to take a little while for it to actually apply, and we're going to see that this week here in League. But first I want to go ahead and show off this amazing frame that the team had. This is game one, frame one, and all four of us, myself, Christy, Shay, and Brandon, who is back this week, all had a nice, perfect pocket hit in frame one for strikes. It was great. I was the worst strike by being a little bit light, and so, hey, great job to all of us. As game one went forward, I was doing a pretty good job of making sure that I was starting off with my feet and hips in the right place. But I was still really tentative, as I was last week. Until about the middle of game one, Brandon said something to me about wishing I wouldn't be so much up the back of the ball. At which point I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I can actually throw this thing hard. And I did. And I started coming through the ball a bit more, being a bit more aggressive with it, and had a good game. I shot 208, and happy. Good game one. Game two was not nearly as good. In fact, it was kind of disastrous. The first frame was a ball that just went high, and I was probably going to be able to adjust off of that. No big deal. Unfortunately, I whiffed the spare, and that put me in a place, not too terrible, but I was like, about it. The second frame, I didn't get my stance right. I was just off, and so I missed right and left I think it was a bucket that I then promptly missed on as well. And so I had two opens. I was sitting there thinking, okay, not sure if the Obsession Tour is going to last the whole night. Let me think about maybe making a ball change right now, since now's a good time for it. And I did. And I don't think I made the right choice. I threw the infinite for a frame, didn't feel good about it. Went to the alert, had one good look with it, which was kind of okay. And then threw like 3 or 4 more shots with it. It just didn't work. It didn't have the traction to actually work at this point in time in the night. In the end, the best ball to be in was the infinite at that time. And I eventually finally went back to it and did okay. But in the end, between leaving big, chonky 6 and 7 counts with the alert and missing those spares, I ended up shooting a great 140 for that game. And was just like, ugh. I wasn't feeling as lost as I was last week when I was really bad, but it was just in a place of wasn't the right ball and kept trying to force that ball before going back to what was probably the right ball at the time. In addition to being the wrong ball, I was also not consistent with my stance and push away. So that was adding to the problems of the ball just being too weak for what I was wanting to do with it at the time. So Overall, game two was a complete loss. I thought I was doing some science early on. Turns out I was just making bad decisions. So, a thing to learn from, a thing I can move on from, and in fact, moved on in the next game. Game three ended up being a lot better because I was back in what was the right ball at the time and was still conscious about making the right positions in terms of being in the right place at my stance, and that helped me out a lot. Through the early part of the game, I was struggling a little bit with tape. I think my thumb swelled a little bit, so I had to make a couple adjustments there. And then middle of the game, I just started having a real hard time getting the infinite down the lane. Part of it I was missing inside a little bit, probably related to, again, the stance and the hips, but also just I just wasn't comfortable throwing it. So I went ahead and switched to the Zen on the theory that, hey, I'm gonna probably feel comfortable with it. Let's just go and see what happens with it. I can pick it, grab it, and chuck it, and it worked. For whatever reason, switching balls, even though the fit's the same, made me feel a little bit more comfortable getting the ball over where I was aiming. So I don't know what's up with that. I got to think about that. But from that point, I was good. I would have shot 200 that game as well, but I whiffed a 3.610 spare. Fine, those are challenging sometimes. And then left a split, left a 4.9. So it's a game that after shooting 140, I'm perfectly happy with. Could have been better, should have been better. I was getting tired. It was harder to keep myself in the right starting position. I also think I was getting specifically tired from that. Being back on my hips a bit more, my shoulders turned a bit more, was a new place for me to start my shot in. And so it was a little bit stiff causing down here in the hip area. So it's a thing that I definitely will be working on and doing more stretches to account for and trying more in practice. So that's where game three kind of landed. So overall, it was a okay week. Had a good start, had a pretty good finish. Got reinforced this change that I'm making, which is relatively a small change. It's not something as big as making a release change or making a big timing change. I'm just adjusting my start position to help my swing plane when I'm playing a certain part of the lane. And in the end, this is probably going to help me out pretty well. It's a change that I have to make sure I remember to do every single time until it's automatic. Once it happens, I think I'll be in a really good place because I think this is going to be a good, effective change for me. I just have to do it, have to go there and practice it, and get forward from there. So one last thought is this past weekend, I actually thought about going to bowl in a tournament. Didn't find anything I was necessarily comfortable going to bowl. And part of it is $80 entry fee for a tournament, not the greatest, especially when I'm going to be going into these not for the purpose of winning. I'm not ever good enough to bowl with the expectation of actually cashing in something like this, especially since this weekend, apparently since the U.S. Open was over in Indianapolis, we had at least 6 or 7 pros showing up at a couple tournaments I was looking at this weekend, including Jacob Buttroff. So, which would have been a really cool experience. I actually get to bowl in a tournament with a number of pros in it. And I do need to get back at some point and start bowling these events and start getting back out there. So I feel like I'm starting to get to where I am comfortable enough with my game again that I'm going to need to go ahead and start getting back out there, get on some sports shots, get on some longer days, and just get out there and bowl with more competitive people. I know that I'm going to be going to these events without the chance of winning it. That's not what I bowl for. I bowl for challenging myself and bowling for the experience of being in these events. And it would have been really cool to go out there and bowl this event. There's one event on Saturday, which was $80 for 4 games of qualifying, and that's just a bad deal. I mean, $20 a game, even at a local house, no. But on Sunday was $80 for 6 games qualifying, which that's reasonable. So would have been a cool experience. Would have been fun to do. I just wasn't quite feeling ready enough to do it at that point and end up having better plans on Sunday anyway. So in the end, I think it was the right choice right now. But tell me what you think. At this point, would you go bowl tournaments that you know you're not going to win, but as a case of, do you value the experience? Do you think getting the ball on a sports shot is worth just paying for on its own? Do you find it enjoyable to go bowl on tournaments and be around other good bowlers rather than just playing League every week in and week out. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Be cool to really hear from y'all in terms of what you do, what you think I should do, just things you can find. And if you're aware of any tournament series around the Chicago area that aren't ABT, let me know. So thanks again for watching. Have a good one. See you in the next one. Good luck and good bowling.